Hey, all, I'm just gonna dip my feet back into some annoying culture war stuff again. I'm sorry for that. I had an opportunity to watch an excerpt of an interview that Donald Trump gave with Candace Owens of the Daily Wire. And the excerpt that I watched had to do with the COVID vaccine. I have to say, I'm sick of COVID. I'm sick of the hysteria. I'm sick of the paranoia of people who want to lock down, particularly people who are vaccinated or triple vaccinated, wearing masks, want everyone to shut down. I'm sick of it. I'm also really sick of the vaccine debate. I'm not just taking a safe middle ground on this one. I really detest both extremes in this argument. I am really offended at people who think that we can vaccinate ourselves out of this pandemic, because that's not true. That's never been true. And as Omicron infects people who are vaccinated, it's really clear that it's not the way to get out of the pandemic. We can't control this thing. On the other end, and I've made videos about this, I'm also really sick of the certain part of the conservative movement that has chosen to latch on to an anti-vaccine stance, oftentimes without any curiosity about how the vaccines work, what they are meant to do, and how they have benefited us by, keeping our hospital admissions down. Anyways, all that's out of the way. I'm not going to get back into that, but I have to give Trump some credit right now, because I think he is a politician, not just a businessman or outsider. He's a politician, and he does a lot of pandering. And he's gotten criticized by the anti-vaccine portion of his movement, for getting vaccinated and now apparently getting a booster. But Owens, she asked him about this, and I think she's trying to raise her clout on this. I think Candace Owens has a great habit of making an ass of herself. And certainly I think this is the area that she's really made an ass of herself on lately. But she was asking him about the vaccines and the mandates, and I think Trump did something that he normally doesn't do, which is he separated the issue of the vaccine from the obnoxious people that want everyone vaccinated and everyone locked down. And I was impressed with that. And something he said, look, the results of the vaccines are very good, and if you do get COVID, it's a very minor form. People aren't dying when they take the vaccine. So the ones that get very sick and go to the hospital are the ones that don't take their vaccine. But it's still their choice, and if you take the vaccine, you are protected. And I'm going to give Trump some credit for that, because he's gotten booed by his supporters for advocating for people to get vaccinated, and he doesn't seem to care. And I think this was something that was an accomplishment of his administration, and something that he rightfully said was a great achievement, to get vaccines out the door within a year of the pandemic hitting. And I don't think you can argue with it. I don't know how you can argue with this. The vaccines have helped people avoid getting disease stage COVID. And Candace Owens is somebody I don't particularly care for. I kind of like the Daily Wire. I like Ben Shapiro, all right. I don't agree with everything he has to say. I really like Matt Walsh. I think he's really funny. The other personalities there I'm not as familiar with, but I like what they're trying to do right now, which is to build some culture from the right, because everything in entertainment and news seems to come from the left side. And I also appreciate Ben Shapiro sticking up against the OSHA mandate that the Biden administration is pushing, because I think it is overreach. But Candace Owens, in my opinion, she's something that rhymes with the word drifter. But I'll let you figure out what that is. She's probably one of the most self-promotional people out there. And I suspect at least this part of the interview did not go as well for Candace as she had hoped it would, because she had to pivot the next day and accuse, I think it was Newsweek or other publications, of misinterpreting her views on the COVID vaccines. And so yesterday, good old Candace says, I have no issue with any person who wants to get the vaccine. I just will never let that vaccine into my body. I believe firmly that Big Pharma is the greatest evil on the face of the planet. I am healthy, young, in shape, and simply unafraid of COVID-19. And I have no problem with that on its face. I also have no problem with people pointing out that there are people that have really bad side effects from the vaccines, and that there have been some deaths that look like they've been caused by the vaccines. And that's why I have an issue with mandating this vaccine right now. I certainly believe that COVID is serious. I definitely do. I don't think most people should take the risk of a serious infection. On the other hand, this is not the 1918 Spanish flu epidemic, and mandating vaccines right now doesn't seem necessary. We've had a lot of, hundreds of millions of people, including myself, that went out and got vaccinated. I think the only argument for mandating the vaccine, and I'm not even comfortable with this one, is just that it's going to overflow the hospitals if we have more and more people with disease stage COVID taking up beds. That's the only justification I can think of for a mandate. And so certainly there, I could agree with Candace Owens if she brought that up. But instead, she's telling you how dangerous this vaccine is. And I think she thought during this interview she was going to get Trump to kind of backpedal or do a mealy-mouthed thing or play both sides, but he stuck with it. He stuck with something that I think is incontrovertible at this point, which is that the vaccines are helping keep people out of the hospitals. They're helping people avoid disease stage sickness. And I don't think Candace Owens would ever have the stones to admit that. I really don't, because I think to acknowledge that would introduce a level of complexity and nuance that is incompatible with her outrage-driven business model. Even her putative boss, Ben Shapiro, he's vaccinated. He points out that the vaccines have kept people out of the hospitals and saved lives. But she can't do that, because the second she does that, because she's entrenched herself so far into this position, she is going to get criticized the way that Trump got criticized for encouraging people to get vaccinated. Like I said before, vaccines are not going to get us out of this pandemic. They will help us. They're one tool, but there's a lot of things that have to happen. And one of them is we have to be able to have treatments. We cannot continue to lock down. We have to be willing to see the unintended consequences of our COVID response. And if Owens sticks to that, that's fine. And if Owens, to me, just says, look, I don't want to get vaccinated, I'm not comfortable with it, I'm fine. Except, and I have to bring this up, and one of the people that responded to Candace brought this up, I think Candace Owens is actually vaccinated. I do. It's either that or she has some pretty good connections at Madison Square Garden. And let me explain. Back in late October or early November, she made an appearance at a UFC fight down at MSG in the city. And anyone who knows anything about the outgoing comrade dictator of New York City knows that to go basically anywhere indoors, with the exception of maybe a bodega or a deli in the city, you are at least required to show proof of vaccination. And this has been a part of these, so-called keys to reopening the city. That it's completely stupid is beyond me. That it flies in the face of the fact that people who are vaccinated are still spreading COVID at heavy rates, that's a whole other story. But Candace, she was there at Madison Square Garden, where back in October even, you had to prove that, I think back then you had to prove that you had at least one dose. It might have been two. And back then there was still an exemption for performers or athletes, but not for spectators. And she was clearly there as a spectator. And so I thought about it. I did a little logic tree. Either she knows somebody at Madison Square Garden who kind of snuck her in, so to speak. I suppose that's a possibility. And she's covering up for this person, which personally I guess I'd be fine with. Or, conversely, she's vaccinated. Now, if I had to put my money on it, I'd think that she is vaccinated. The reason why? She's pretty well to do. She's making good money off of her appearances, off of her show, off of her promotion. And I have no problem with that. But she can't go back now. She can't do what Trump did the other day, and to say, the vaccines are working, they're keeping people out of the hospital. To do that, as I said before, it would destroy that business model. And so yesterday, she was in some Twitter spat with Meghan McCain, who's, to me, an equally annoying media personality. And I think what's getting lost in this is just how much she benefits from her hysteria about COVID vaccines, which is just another form of COVID hysteria. And I think anyone who follows these people needs to be cautious, because there is always somebody who could be cashing in on you, who's telling you not to get vaccinated. And you got to ask yourself, is there something in it for them? And maybe they're not vaccinated, but maybe they are. And they just want that cash. They just want that promotion. Now, I was in New York City last week. Brought my son down to see a medical specialist that he has to see there. And I brought him, but we didn't go into any restaurants. And I'm fearful that New York City's stupid mandates are going to make their way up the river to other parts of the state. And I suspect they will. And I pray for the strength to hold out. Because even though I'm vaccinated, I don't want to show a freaking vaccine card to enter a restaurant. I don't want to show one to go watch a game. I think that's stupid. It's stupid. You can still transmit COVID. The onus is on the individual right now to introduce themselves to what's going on with COVID, to what their risks are. And I'm sorry, this is stupid policy. But hopefully 2020 there'll be more pushback. But I don't think it's going to come from people like Owens. I think she's just cashing in on this the way that the hysterical people on the left are cashing in on everyone being afraid of COVID. And she's out of touch. She doesn't have to bear the consequences of this. And so I'm glad she got some pushback, and I'm glad that Trump didn't take the bait. Good for him. Anyways, good luck to you in 2022. I hope that it'll be a better year. I hope, but I'm not too optimistic that we are going to see the end of COVID or lockdowns or the hysteria in the new year. God bless you. Be safe. Happy New Year.